Hi, everyone. I am Sunil Simha. I am Northwestern University and University of Chicago. So I'm a joint postdoctoral fellow at two universities, and it's been a fun year of being a postdoc so far. And my work mainly pertains to using FRBs as probes of foreground baryons. So yeah, without further ado, let's get started. Well, okay, a little bit of an ado, I guess. I do want to thank all the organizers for inviting me to ICTS. It is just wonderful. So Kaustubh and I have been having great fun. ICTS we've been seeing so many birds. It's just been wonderful being here. And yeah, it's great to have an official excuse to be back home in Bangalore. Anyway, so why do we care about FRBs? They're wonderful and all that. They're millisecond duration transients. They're pretty much unique in a phase space of transients in the universe. But they are transients. They're flashy. They're quick, and for all their merits, we're still really far away from figuring out what produces FRBs. We kind of think it's magnetars, as previous speakers have alluded to before, but it'll probably still take a long time to figure out what exactly is going on and how the FRBs are being produced. Case in point, pulsars are still an active area of research despite being introduced or discovered about 60 years ago. So we still haven't figured out what's inside a pulsar. Will we ever figure out what's producing an FRB? We don't know, but we hope we will. But despite not knowing all of that, you can still do a lot with FRBs because what they are, as I said, they're uniquely millisecond duration in very short bursts. And what that means is that as they arrive on Earth, you can actually measure propagation effects that you would never be able to do for other longer duration transients. So let's say you measure variations in the brightness of a quasar. That's a transient emission, but you wouldn't be able to do the kind of research that we can do with FRBs. So the primary motivation for trying to use FRBs comes from basically the missing baryon problem, as Kaustubh mentioned on Monday. Just briefly, so there are two missing baryon problems, or two flavors of it, essentially. Here I'm talking about the one that is in the intergalactic medium. So if people wanted to do a census of baryons in the nearby universe, and people have done that. So basically it would be asking the question, let me take whatever observational probes I can get my hands on and count all the baryons in various phases, in the stars, in the gases, the neutral, ionized, what have you, all of these things, and let me count up how many baryons there are. Okay, why is this interesting to do? This would be a test of basically cosmological predictions from the CMB and baryon, I guess, nucleogenesis and whatnot. So you do this exercise, and then you figure out whether this tallies with what we know from these other probes. And turned out that in 2004, and I guess it went all the way out till 2012 even, and a little beyond, maybe until 2018 even. A lot of baryons were missing in the universe. So about 30 to 50% if you look at the error bars. And what do I mean by missing? It's just that people were not able to observe these. And theoretically, there was a good reason for it. Most of these baryons were locked into this extremely warm and hot and diffuse phase. So this is a simulation volume from Romil Dave et al., where they're showing this extremely hot, so 10 to the 6 or 10 to the 7 Kelvin gas that is pervading the cosmic web as we know it. And because this is so hot and diffuse, so when I say diffuse, I'm talking of the order of 10 to the -5 electrons per centimeter cube or something like that, which is super rare. So you would not expect to see any meaningful amount of emission from this sort of diffuse medium. So, I mean, it's really hot, so it should produce X-rays. But it's so diffuse that you barely would be able to see them. So a large chunk of matter, according to simulations, was locked into this. People did try, of course, to observe these things directly. Here is, I believe, something like 1 million-second spectrum each from X-ray telescopes. So this is by Nicastro et al., where they looked at particular sight lines of like X-ray bright quasars, and they just stared at it for really long until they saw this very weak transition from what is thought to be an O7, an oxygen 7 line. So oxygen 7 is supposed to be tracing hot gas, and that's why when you detect this thing, it's an indication of there being a cloud of something extremely hot and nebulous out there. So like I said, each of these required 1 million-second integrations, so expensive spectra. But like going from this to solving the missing baryon problem is a bit of a long shot. You could try using something like the SZ effect. So here, what de Graaf et al. Have done, and then there's also a companion paper, or like from a independent team, Tanimura et al., during the same time frame, where they looked at the SZ effect stacking analysis. So they looked at SDSS galaxies that were separated by a certain like physical separation. And then they just took the SZ effect in between those galaxies, and they tried to stack them all together. So that's the signal from the stacking. And you could model the individual halo terms surrounding the galaxies, and you back out this sort of residual in between the galaxies themselves, which is clearly an indication of there is something there. It's just really hard to see. To put that into context, what I mean by hard to see is this thing, signal that's like a 2 to 3 sigma detection, came from stacking, I think, 2 million galaxy pairs in SDSS. So it takes a lot to just see these diffuse baryons. That's where FRBs come in. So briefly, at the location of the FRB burst, that's what it kind of looks like if you were to take a waterfall plot. It's just broadband emission in pretty much all the frequencies. I have to correct myself, not saying wavelengths instead of frequencies, I guess, this radio crowd. And it goes through all sorts of ionized gas from the host ISM, the host halo, the cosmic web, Milky Way, blah, blah, yada, yada, including the Earth's atmosphere, And by the time it comes to us, you have this very beautiful dispersion sweep that is predicted by plasma physics. You can actually go derive this 1 by nu square term based off of your, I guess, your Maxwell's equations. And yeah, you know exactly how this works. So this amount of sweep is obviously, everyone is familiar, is what is proportional to the dispersion measure, or how much stuff or ionized matter is between the FRB and us. So the more stuff there is, the more dispersed it will be. So that's great. We're actually having this nice probe of ionized matter. And it's really sensitive because radio telescopes have got amazing clocks, and you can actually precisely measure the time delay between the highest and lowest frequencies. And that you could convert to a super precision on the dispersion measure itself, something like 1% or even less. More often, I keep seeing like 0.1% precision on these things. So this is great. So you can actually have a very sensitive probe of the ionized gas that people were trying so hard to observe. But there's a catch. You need to know how far away the FRB is. The FRB radio spectrum itself does not give you any sort of clue about the distance to the FRB. Of course, the dispersion measure is correlated with distance, but as Kriti showed, there's a large amount of scatter associated with it because of various reasons. There's just clumpy matter all over the universe, and so depending on what kind of clumps the FRB has gone through, you just get different amounts of dispersion. So you need an independent measure of distance, and that's where localizing FRBs to host galaxies comes in. And as Kriti mentioned, there have been several experiments throughout the years that have localized, at this point, about more than 100 one-off events. Typo, sorry about that. One-off events so far. So we have the host galaxies. We go in the optical or whatever, infrared, just point a CCD at it, get its redshift, and voila, you have a distance now. So that's great. So this basically solved the missing baryon problem as in 2020. So this was conclusive evidence. So if you were to take the dispersion measure, the cosmic component at least, you guess some amount for the host contribution, and you subtract out some empirical model for the Milky Way contribution, and you're left with the cosmic web. You plot that as a function of FRB redshift, and you have this beautiful relationship. This line over here is not a fit to the data, it's a prediction. And you can see the data points themselves are, more or less scattered around the prediction itself, which is great. Here's a more recent version of the plot with all the FRBs that the F4 collaboration of which I'm part of knows about, and you can see, so all of these pink points over here, light pink, are FRBs. Here, instead of plotting the cosmic contribution, I'm keeping the host galaxy term in, so that's why it's called extragalactic, DMEG. And you could see this still sort of like positive correlation with redshift, as you would expect. And so because it's not a DM cosmic plot, I'm adding some ansatz for the host contribution itself when I'm plotting the McCart relation. And so you could see, you could explain this sort of trend in the FRB dispersion measures quite easily by just what we know from the cosmology and the distribution of gas in the universe, which is great. Also, you should, we're starting to see some interesting information at this point. Look at this space over here, where I have basically put this line 60% of the McCart relation down. There seems to be no FRB down here except for this guy over here, ignore him. He seems to be very low redshift. We don't know the host galaxy contribution, so to answer your question, there's some errors in the host galaxy terms there. So modulo the error in that, clearly there seems to be some sort of a cliff below which FRBs seem to not want to occur at all. So this is clearly an indication of there being some sort of a diffuse cosmic term that's just sitting there, despite even if you were to choose the most underdense sightline in the universe, you wouldn't be able to go below this value, so which is super neat. So that begs the question, of course, where are all the baryons? We found them in the sense that they're not missing anymore, but that doesn't mean we figured out where exactly in the universe they are. Are they in halos? Are they in the diffuse intergalactic medium? What is going on in the universe? And this question is super important because it ties into our understanding of how galaxies work. If you had a universe where galaxies never threw out any of the matter that accreted onto them, you would have a very, very clumpy universe, and basically you would see a ton of scatter over here. But of course, in our universe, we have feedback processes which basically determine how much material is getting thrown out into the universe outside the galaxies. And so based on your model of feedback, you can get, I guess, a different kind of extragalactic dispersion measure distribution in the universe. So figuring out where they are is important to answer how exactly galaxies galaxy feedback works. So there are, over the years, people have come up with various approaches to probing baryons along FRB sightlines. Here I'm going to talk about very briefly some of the more recent methods that have come out from the FRB community and I guess theoreticians, cosmologists, all sorts, very diverse crowd. Here are two examples from led by the DSA collaboration and also people from Harvard. One way to get this sort of information is to go to a simulation and say, okay, tell me what the universe of the simulation looks like. So Liam Connor led this work where they basically looked at all the DSA FRBs and augmented it with sample from the literature at the time. Basically, they took a simulation and they tried to train a model based off of it and fit the data with some free parameters that basically like fractions of baryons in halos, fractions in the IgM. So by doing so, they were able to back out the individual fractions, and so they were able to say, what fraction of baryons are in the IgM, for instance. So that's one way of going about it. Kriti here has also led another work where you could go to the simulations once again and ask how does a certain model of feedback affect the matter power spectrum suppression in the universe, and subsequently how does that translate to a variance, or how does that translate to the distribution of the dispersion measures that you would get from FRBs in the real universe. So there could be this sort of one-to-one mapping between all of these observables, which leads us. So if you have a large enough sample, that's Kriti's prediction, so something like 10,000 FRBs, you will be able to exquisitely say something about the matter power spectrum suppression, or I guess basically the same, the baryon fractions in the IgM and the CGM. You could also do cross-correlation analyses. Here, I'm showing some work by Hao-Chen Wang, and also Kriti has done another paper where they look at the FRB dispersion measure cross-correlated with galaxy numbers in photometric redshift surveys. And so you could try to back out some sort of a similar power spectrum measurement based off of how these two populations are correlated. Now you could also do this in physical space as opposed to Fourier space, is what is happening over here. And basically, as the questions are sightlines that have more FRB, or FRB sightlines that have more foreground galaxies with determined by photoz's basically. Are they showing some sort of correlation between the dispersion measure that they have and the foreground number densities? And this one is led by Mariam Hosseini, but there was also another work by Tsui-Yin Xu, where they looked at basically the same thing, and they concluded that indeed, yeah, you could do this. So there's a lot of really new, interesting ideas floating around and trying to measure baryons in the universe at the moment. I prefer a little more direct of an approach. Basically, I just want to locate them by hand. I just want to look at them and see if I could say something about baryons by seeing where the galaxies are distributed along the sightline. So the inspiration for this idea came from FRB 190608A. So this was a craft FRB that was localized to an SDSS host galaxy. So that's what it looks like in SDSS. It's got a redshift even. It's got 0.11778, and all of these other data points over here are galaxies that are in the foreground essentially of this FRB sightline. So we already have the spectroscopic database that tells you everything about this foreground over here. that's what the HST image of the host galaxy looks like. So you can clearly see this FRB has been localized to the star-forming clump over here. This is a UV image, so you can clearly see hot stars producing UV radiation at that location. So that's super cool. So can we say something about, can we do like a baryon budgeting? That was the question that we did. We asked, can we say something about which components in the foreground contribute to how much dispersion measure? So we decided to do an end-to-end study. So basically, we wanted to figure out the dispersion measures from the Milky Way, the cosmic web, and also the host galaxy. And we used different models for every single one of these. The host galaxy paper itself, so that became an independent paper in and of itself because we got some IFU observations, in this case, again, KCWI, trying to look at the H alpha emission at the FRB location and try to convert it to some sort of a dispersion measure estimate. So I led this other work over here where I was looking more into the cosmic web contributions to the dispersion measure. The Milky Way, thankfully, there is a body of work from the pulsar community that basically tells us if for any given sightline, what could be the dispersion measure from the Milky Way. And that's, in this case, we're using the NE 2001 model. You could also use YNW16, but at the time, we just used NE 2001. So the cosmic web contribution needed a clear analysis to estimate it for this particular sightline. So the way I chose to go about doing this was to split the dispersion measure component from the cosmic web into two bits. So one being from the intervening halos directly. So this is halo gas. And the other being whatever is not in the halo gas. So I'm going to call that the IgM term, intergalactic medium. So let's begin with the halo gas. So here's what I did. For every foreground galaxy in SDSS, I basically had an impact parameter estimate because I had the redshift for every one of these. And I also had a mass estimate for it. I could just get it from SED fitting, which we'll be doing today, as Kriti mentioned. So if you have a mass, stellar mass, you could convert it to a halo mass using some like empirical relations. There is some large error associated with it, but okay, let's just see what happens. And so if you have a halo mass, you have a virial radius associated with it. So you could say there's some gas distribution within that virial radius. And we chose to use the Prochaska and Zheng 2019 model for that. So this is what is called the modified NFW profile. This was motivated by quasar absorption observations, but well, we thought, it's hot gas. Quasar absorption in 06 happens because of like warm and hot gas. So let's see if this works in this case. So you just repeat this exercise. So you know the impact parameter, you know the halo occupation of baryons, you just integrate that profile along the line of sight and you get a dispersion measure estimate for this particular halo. You just repeat this for all foreground galaxies. So that's the halo term. The diffuse IgM term turned out to be a little more complex, and we basically needed to compute the filaments, the gas filaments and the filament densities themselves along the sightline. Previously, we had code to do it in terms of like Wiener filtered reconstructions and whatnot. But while I was working at UC Santa Cruz as a PhD student, a postdoc at the time working with my advisor, so he was working on a model based off of the slime mold, which would reconstruct the diffuse IgM filaments. And so this is called the Monte Carlo Fissarum machine. And the idea is that if you simulate galaxies as food particles in a Petri dish, and you let these slime mold particles just like, freely flow between these food particles, they will form a network. And the slime mold particle density should be correlated to the tastiness of the food. And in this case, the tastiness was proportional to how massive the galaxy was, essentially. So more massive galaxies should be much more well-connected in the cosmic web than less massive galaxies. And that should make intuitive sense to everyone. And using that principle and, of course, calibrating it off of a cosmological hydrodynamical simulation. No, it was only a dark matter simulation. Sorry, I take that back. Dark matter simulation. People were able to back out the cosmic web densities along the sightline. And that's what it looked like, this reconstruction for FRB 190608. And you can see the sightline over here in red and all of this filamentary gas intersecting it at various points. So based off of this model, this is what we found for the baryon budget of this particular FRB. About 30% of the dispersion measure was coming from the FRB host. The Milky Way had about roughly similar, about 20–25%. Galactic halos had an almost negligible or like very small contribution. It was not negligible, I guess. We definitely detected a few order 2 intersections along the sightline. And the IGM took care of the rest of it. So if you add all of these things together and you squint hard enough, you'll see 100% with some error bars. So you could actually do a full baryon budget using this sort of model, which gave us some confidence. So this was great. We basically were able to say, you could figure out where in the universe the baryons are given an FRB sightline and this sort of foreground information. So that's how we got started on the FlimFlam project. This is doing this sort of exercise on a statistical level. Basically, what we want to do is to figure out if we can tighten some of the assumptions that went into this calculation. So one of the key assumptions, of course, are the baryon fractions themselves. So the IGM baryon fraction is unknown. There is no strong observational constraint on it. Similarly, the gas fraction of baryons retained within the halos after feedback, that is also unknown. The radial extent of the halos, the halo gas itself, we don't know much about that either. I mean, we have some idea, but not a very strong constraint. At the same time, there's this nuisance parameter DM host. Well, in this case, this particular host galaxy, we had exquisite KCWI observations, so we could actually put some informed estimates on the dispersion measure. But more often than not, if you remember some of the FRB sightlines that I initially showed, the Krakow localization, the craft localizations, the localization region could span the entire galaxy, at which point you have no idea what is going on. So this becomes a nuisance parameter that you'd have to deal with separately on a sightline to sightline basis. So that's FlimFlam. That's a mouthful. It's got a bunch of acronyms within it, but it's my favorite acronym. And the idea is just to get spectroscopic redshifts for, I don't know, say 50 FRB hosts or order, something like that, 30 or so. And we just wanted to repeat this exercise of reconstruction and see if we can get somewhere. So the survey design was like this. We had multiple components. It was a wedding cake approach where we had a wide field spectroscopy for relatively shallow depths, but it covered like 1.2 degrees out of the FRB, and then narrow field spectroscopy from like 10-meter class telescopes, essentially, that covered a much smaller field of view, but it went a lot deeper. And then finally, we have IFU spectroscopy for the really like tiny region around the FRB itself that covered, hopefully, any and all dwarf galaxies that could be intersecting along the sightline. So we wanted, at that time we wanted 20 FRBs, but now I think we have around 35 for the latest sample. So things are going well. And the aim was to constrain the baryons in the diffuse IGM to 10% precision. That was the prediction. And so DR1, the first data release, had a modest 8 FRB sightlines for which we did this. Here is one of them. This is FRB 0906. This is another craft FRB, and you could see the galaxies in the foreground shown in this sort of white color over here. The cosmic web reconstruction itself is shown in this like purple red color map. And that's the FRB over there. So those are the halos that are intersecting along the sightline. And in this case, we didn't just look at the galaxy halos. We also tried to find groups and clusters through a group finding algorithm. And we included that also. So you see some of these massive halos over here. Funnily enough, there seems to be no halo intersection for this particular sightline. We got quite a few of those, which is interesting. And those were the constraints that we backed out from it. So FIGM was constrained to 0.6 plus or minus 10. Those are 1 sigma errors. 0.1. So it's a little more than 20% error in 1 sigma. So not stellar, but we got some confidence in our method. So we were actually getting constraints at a point. If you compare this with some of the previous work, so directly Liam Connor's work that came out a little later, it seems to be in mild tension. So Liam would prefer a slightly higher value, so something closer to 0.8. We maintain that our errors are still consistent with that. So it's not a very strong tension as of yet. So we need to see what happens in the next iteration of FlimFlam, which is hopefully coming out soon. This is what we can expect with something like 30 sightlines, much like 10% precision with FIGM, and like much better precision on FCAS, which previously we didn't really get much of. This is within 2 sigma, this is close to 0. So yeah, we could do a lot better with that. So, there's work in progress. We want to see a whole lot of things. We want to make sure we could play around with the halo occupation models. Why should it be modified NFW? It could be anything. Yeah, so we want to see what happens if you change that. We are also getting Subaru PFS time. We actually already have the observations, and we're getting, 2,000 redshifts within 4 hours. So if you want a redshift machine, that's Subaru PFS. Get yourself a Japanese collaborator. It's great. So yeah, so it's going fantastically. We have just almost finalized our density reconstruction algorithm. We revamped it because previously we were using a method that was not, I guess, physically motivated completely. So here we're doing a much faster algorithm, and also it basically runs a full n-body solver very quickly on a GPU. So we get hopefully much more physically motivated reconstructions for the cosmic web itself. So let's see what we get from that. Future prospects. So, I mean, maybe one could consider thinking about doing this in an era of like large redshift surveys and large FRB surveys. DSE 2000 is going to come in, I don't know, 10 years, would you say? Something like that, let's say. Let's be optimistic. And SK is going to be on the horizon at some point. Spotlight is going to come out soon. So lots of new FRB detection experiments, lots of FRBs to see. And at the same time, we're going to have this sort of amazing spectroscopic coverage from DESI itself. So we're going to get a ton of spectra. So we don't need to do most of this foreground mapping that we did. We don't need to go out and collect our own redshifts. So we could just piggyback off of DESI or Foremost or any of the other redshift surveys that are coming out. So, if you think about doing this for 200 sightlines, you could get a little fancy. Why should the halo gas retention be constant for any halo mass? There could be feedback variations across halo masses. So you could try to have an independent FCAS value for, say, galaxies, groups, and clusters. And you could get constraints that look like this, which could be great. So in summary, flim-flam is one of the many possible ways you could try to constrain foreground baryons along FRB sightlines. And this being one of the most direct approaches has the advantage that you are maximally trying to use the information in the foreground to make predictions about the baryon distribution in halos and the IgM. So you don't need a very large sample of FRBs to get reasonable constraints. And we're gonna hopefully deliver DR2 soon. We've finally gotten our reconstruction algorithm to work. So we're ramping up progress on that. Thank you all for listening, and I'm happy to take any questions now.
Questions for Sunil?
Hey Sunil, nice job.
Thank you.
So I had one question about the uncertainty in the model itself. Like, so you mentioned that you were getting the values of the FIGM having some tension. So,
right.
Since you are just, so is there an independent way to test this model out? That is what I want to ask. Because of these free parameters, what is happening now is that it could happen that your model is doing well with, but I'm not sure, I'm not able to frame it out properly. But more or less, I want to ask, is there an independent way to verify if this model is working out fine or not? Especially given this, like the potential tension that you mentioned.
Right, I guess. So yeah, the question would be, what other experiments could you do to back out these model parameters? So yeah, the alternative ways to do this sort of baryon mapping that I mentioned initially, so either by using like cross-correlation analyses with galaxies, so DM galaxy cross-correlations, or something like, just plugging it into a simulation and trying to back out these parameter values. So those are alternative approaches. They still use FRBs, obviously. So if you're going to work with the same sample, and hopefully if you've dealt with all the systematics in every one of these experiments, you'll probably back out the same numbers. In which case, so I guess it becomes a problem of figuring out what other probe can do this for you. Hard to say. You could probably do something with, like, I don't know, like cluster cosmology, that sort of thing. So you could back out, right, things like, so X-ray people are already backing out the gas retention fraction within clusters. So that could be a key predictable that could be tested against this sort of like FRB-based approach. So similar other, like maybe SZ effect could have a constraint that we could get. So yeah.
I had one more question. So you mentioned that using Sunyak-Zeldovich, the constraints were not that strong. Why is that so? Does it have to do with the fact that Sunyak-Zeldovich, you generally have your electron densities being coupled with, say, the temperature or the velocity? Or is it some other reason that you're getting better constraints with, say, FRB-DM measurements than Sunyak-Zeldovich?
It's just a matter of sensitivity, right? It's in FRBs are just sensitive to integral NE, and as the effect will go as what, NE squared. So that basically means as the effect can only be seen for some of the most densest distributions of matter. So if you want to do something like filamentary gas, that is really, really diffuse. So you have to do this super like extensive stacking analysis where you have 2 million samples. So lots of systematics that would come into that. I mean, this is still pretty impressive that you could get this sort of like measurement. But of course, these are model dependent to some degree or the other. I mean, to be fair, FRBs are also model dependent. So. we're trying to do the best that we can.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
The line of sight, you are adding contribution of different spectroscopy techniques to different galaxies. So how long you have to cover? I mean,
Yeah.
This film you were covering 1 degree up in the spectroscopic given.
Yeah.
So in your result paper, what was covered? 1 second or arc minute, did it depend on the FRB localization?
So yeah, I guess so. Are you asking specifically about the first FRB, the 190608 sightline that I was initially showing? Yeah, so there it was SDSS coverage, so it was order 1 degree roughly on sky. Yeah, so we got it. We got enough coverage to actually see filaments going across the field of view, right? So we want order like 10 megaparsecs or something in projected distance. So if we can get that much, then that's good enough.
Thank you.
I had a question. So you showed one of the experiments done by your previous lab postdoc. So the food particle experiment. So it shows that massive galaxies have larger networks of filaments nearby. But so in cosmology, it can be seen as top-bottom approach or top-down approach. So either low massive cluster form a bigger cluster, or the vice versa. The bigger cluster breaks down into the smaller mass clusters. So is there any? So this shows that either of the two can this experiment or the filament approach can help in breaking the degeneracy, which is what.
So let me clarify in saying that we are only backing out a snapshot of what the filaments look like at a given time, so the present day. So we're not able to say anything about the evolution of masses themselves. So like we're not saying, out of this, we're not backing out the history of this mass assembly.
Right.
So
do you plan to do this experiment at other redshifts to see the evolutionary trend?
The only thing that we would be able to do if we go with FRBs of different redshift ranges would be to look at the individual fractions that I mentioned from our models. So the reconstruction algorithm itself is just a part that allows us to constrain the IgM fraction. That's pretty much it. So we can't use the algorithm itself, which is motivated by some simulation, to say something about how exactly the clustering of halos works in the universe.
Observations, then maybe you can incorporate those to infer the evolution, if you have.
Sure, yeah, I guess, but yeah, I'm not sure if Joe Burchett, who's the postdoc I was talking about, and now a professor, sometime now, can push this algorithm onto, let's see, maybe a different spectroscopic sample. So, but even then, you would only get filament densities, right? So
with redshift evolution, you can see the filament density. If you can track the filament.
So you need to be careful, because this is not this is calibrated against a cosmological simulation. So whatever results it puts out is going to be consistent with that cosmological simulation. So if the simulation has a certain redshift evolution, this will just show up there. So the data itself is not saying anything about how matter evolves. It's just saying matter is distributed this way at this given redshift snapshot.
One of the DM, so the percentage of DM, so there was, the sum wasn't adding up to 100. Can you explain what's the missing part?
Oh, it's not missing, it's just uncertainties.
Okay.
It's going more than 100 if you count it. Yeah, there's just uncertainties associated with it, order of, like, I don't know, each of these have like at least 10%, if not more.
So I
Wait, there's 2 questions, so let's maybe, yeah, you could, and then.
Yes, sure. Okay, thanks for your nice talk. So
Yeah.
I want to ask in the plot of DM versus redshift for the FRBs. So you showed the trend that it is increasing, but the data point for higher redshift that is less. Yeah, this trend. So it is not clear the trend going that much high. This high line, the fitting that you have done.
This is not a fit, firstly. This is just a prediction from what we know of. So if you assume a certain cosmology and you assume a certain fraction of baryons are in the diffuse phase, you will back out this McCart relation. And then you could assume some value for the host galaxy contribution. So that you add to the McCart relation as a function of redshift. So with that 1 plus z term, that's what you back out. So this is not a fit, firstly.
But even a low redshift, so the DM values are, it is not like just going in a straight line. DM.
Yes. So if you're talking about right. So the red data points themselves show like binned mean. So if you bin by redshift and you look at the mean value of dispersion measured for all of these FRBs within that bin, that's the red points. And yeah, you can see this sort of trend, which is like deviating from whatever prediction I have. So, and it's like sort of jagged. And that's simply because we're still dealing with low number statistics. We have I don't know, something like order. So over here, we have maybe 20 FRBs. As you go further and further, this becomes sparser and sparser. So it will probably require, I don't know, maybe 100,000, 10,000 FRBs at least before you start seeing something more smooth.
Yes, sir. That's all I was saying that if we find like in a higher redshift more FRB, so the DM values could be at smaller also.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So then this trend won't be like.
Yeah, I mean, we just need to see, right? We don't have those observations.
This in the data point you have this vertical bars. In some of the data points there are no vertical bars.
Oh, because like this bin has only 1 FRB. So what error would you calculate?
You have mean.
It would be infinite. So like the standard deviation for that.
Okay.
Hello. Thanks for such a good talk. Like I have some of the questions like from the forecast that you did.
Right.
So like I wanted to know like what kind of halo mass function did you use for the halos, and like what kind of electron density profile did you apply, and also like how did you distribute the FRBs, like according to what distribution?
What do you mean by distribution of FRBs?
So like, are these the real data points of FRBs?
Yeah, these are real FRBs.
Yeah. Like so like how about the halo mass function and the density profile of halos?
Right. So we don't assume any halo mass function. We just measure the halo masses of the galaxies. We're sensitive to galaxy halos beyond 10 to the 10 solar masses.
I thought the next one. Yeah. So you were forecasting it, right?
Okay. Here we used a mock sightline essentially.
Like for the mock sightline, like you assume there are some halos in the line of sight, and you distribute some FRBs.
Right.
And according to this, you have used more number of FRBs than there should be. So the more number of FRBs, did you use the real data or did you took it from some simulation with some randomness?
Right. Yeah. So we used the Enriquez 2015 catalog of, I guess, like light cone catalogs. This is based off of TNG, illustrious TNG. And we basically said, okay, we're going to plop FRBs onto galaxies at some random redshifts. We didn't assume anything for like the FRB population itself. We just said they should be on a galaxy. And we also required that no 2 FRBs are coming too close to each other so that the sightlines are uncorrelated for the most part.
So like whichever way the FRBs are distributed in
Right.
whichever sense,
Mm.
so so your results will be biased in that sense. The distribution of FRBs relate to how your dispersion measure, how your IGM contribution and everything.
Sure.
Yeah. So
Yeah. I mean, this is trying to do an apples to apples comparison. We basically tried to set the same redshift range that we had for flim-flam DR1 and DR2. So that's like redshift below 0.5 for all the FRBs. So yeah, I mean, you could have a situation where like it's biased because like, you know, you're in your mocks, you have FRBs that go up to redshift 2 or something like that. We have avoided that for the most part. There could be other selection effects, sure. Like if there is an intrinsic distribution of FRBs and they're probing one particular redshift more than the other, then like, I don't know, you could have something in that sense. But so far, I don't know if we have evidence for that since we're mostly in the low redshift regime.
and like what kind of halo mass function did you
Halo
use?
mass function, you'll probably have to look up the paper for Enrique's 2015. This
Okay.
is MTNG, or sorry, illustrious TNG, right? So whatever halo mass there.
Okay, fine. The same electron density profile.
Electron, it's a baryon painting thing. So, I guess for this forecast, yes, we used the same modified NFW profile. So we took the masses from the simulation and we just painted on baryons in the halo.
And like before this, like you were saying about like the direct approach. So like I'm not much aware. So like, are there any other approaches like?
Right, that's what I mentioned, right? So people, so Kriti here, you should definitely
Okay,
talk to her.
like from the
Yeah.
spectroscopy and all.
No. So what I mentioned was like, so cross correlation analysis, DM galaxy numbers, or something like looking at a population as a whole and trying to fit a DM scatter essentially as a function of redshift. So if you were to take the full like Makart relation, the Makart relation itself is a line, but like the FRBs are scattered around it. So you want to model this, right? So this is what is happening over here. So you use as a basis some kind of simulation and try to back that out, back out like model parameters from that. Or like you do something like this where, you know, you're trying to still use data empirically, but it's not to the fine grained detail that flim-flam goes into. It's a little cruder, but like if you have enough FRBs, you could get away with it.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
So,
yeah, so it has to do with the fact that, so if we go to Simba and ask the question of what the FIGM value is for a given feedback model, you can get like value ranges essentially. So if it's like a very low FIGM, what that means is most of the gas or like a sizable chunk of that gas is in the CGM of galaxies. And the way that can happen is if galaxies are not blowing out gas all that much, right? So that's what I meant. Yeah, no problem. Yeah. Thank you.